All right. Hi. Welcome to week 2 of business writing. This week we're going to focus a lot on audience. So, how to identify the audience of a certain document, why knowing your audience really well matters, and how knowing your audience can really help your writing achieve its purpose. I've included the little webcam feature down here alongside this lecture, just so it's not like a disembodied voice or something talking to you. Um, I'm just going to kind of go through these slides and just hit some of the main points of your readings from this week. If you still have any questions about these concepts or anything, once you've read through the chapters and listened to this lecture, feel free to email me. I'm happy to walk through anything with you, give you any clarification you might need. Without further ado, we're just going to kind of go through chapter 1 kind of quickly, just because it really sets the stage for the course as a whole. It's really foundational for a lot of the other concepts that we're going to be touching on this semester. So, chapter 1 is really all about business communication in the digital age. So, chapter 1 talks a lot about communication skills. Really emphasizes that effective communication skills matter in the workplace now more than ever. Probably right now in our current moment more than ever, really, with all the digital communication that's been having to happen. Lots of digital meetings, online classes, things like that. So writing clearly and concisely is really more important than ever. Some top demands from employers identified by surveys featured in the textbook: writing, critical thinking, problem solving skills, self motivation, and team skills. And while you may not think so, a lot of those skills are tied in with writing. To be a good, effective writer, you need critical thinking skills, you need problem solving skills. Obviously, self motivation is a huge factor, and we'll touch on team skills a little later in the semester when you have the opportunity to work with some classmates for a project. So, communication skills, that definition has really evolved over time, as I'm sure you could probably assume. Back in the day, more traditional communication skills really fell under the umbrella of probably things you think of when you hear that word communication. So, things like reading, writing, speaking, so public speaking, discussions, meetings, listening, and nonverbal communication skills. Uh, so, new requirements though in the workplace want you to have all of those traditional skills over here, plus the new requirements of being media savvy. So, being in touch with social media trends, content management when it comes to social media, and not just that, and knowing how those things work, but also having good judgment online. So that means maintaining a positive image, both on your own accounts or whatever company or organizational accounts you might be working with, and protecting the employer's reputation. So I'm sure you've all heard stories about someone making a grave mistake on social media and it leading to negative ramifications at their job. So it's all about just representing yourself well on different media platforms. Writing in the digital age. So, a lot of people assume that now that we're so focused on digital media and online media, that that would require less writing, but in reality, that requires more writing. When you think about how, on the average day, how many digital messages you send, how many emails you receive, respond to, send yourself, we're really just kind of overloaded with writing, which makes it such an integral skill to success in the workplace. Because less business is conducted face to face, again, now more than ever in this lovely moment we're in right now, communicating clearly and effectively has never been more important. When you have just kind of that snapshot, that short little space to communicate with someone, say in an email, you really need to make your message matter. So, why this should matter to you? As a professional, you'll be generating, processing, and exchanging information, most likely at a really rapid rate. As you read in that textbook, workplaces now are more fast-paced than they have been before. So you need to be ready to kind of balance all of that information in coming toward you and putting out information yourself. You'll need to be able to transmit information effectively across various communication channels and media. So you need to know sort of the genre conventions and expectations of different communication channels, how to best handle your writing in each of those situations, and also based on your audience and purpose. So there's a lot of moving parts to all of these communication channels, even though they may seem kind of simple on the surface. And you'll be expected to make sound decisions and solve complex problems. So that kind of ties into what I said in last week's PowerPoint. Good writing really goes beyond that whole idea of sort of good grammar and fancy words. It's really thinking through your process, thinking through sort of the rhetorical situation of your message, how it's going to most effectively come across, how it's most effectively going to reach and affect your audience. Thinking critically in the digital age. Again, anticipating and solving problems, having opinions backed up by reasons and evidence, making decisions and communicating them effectively. All of this ties into your writing. So anticipating and solving problems, before you send some kind of message or piece of writing, you want to be able to look at it and anticipate what someone might misread, clarification that someone might ask for, and go ahead and make those revisions as necessary. Obviously, having opinions backed up by reason and evidence, if you have any sort of factual information, citations within your writing, you want to make sure that that's all correct, it's well researched, it's well presented. And making decisions and communicating them effectively. And that really ties into our next point, which is what Chapter 4 was focused on, which is knowing your audience. I think this is a huge foundation to writing. It's a big reason why we kind of start off with this, because really every piece of writing you make is going to be centered around your audience and who it's for. So starting off with that, we're going to talk about kind of communication barriers. So kind of that first step back here, thinking critically, anticipating and solving problems, you really want to be mindful of what communication barriers your message might run into. So the textbook lays out 4 of the most common, so that's what I have listed here. And the first one they identify is bypassing. So bypassing is simply when people miss each other with their meanings. So in the textbook they use that example of like your boss asks you to help with a certain task, and you assume hypothetically that help means you're going to be a part of like a team or you're going to work with your boss to accomplish this task, when really your boss assumed that you would be completing the task on your own. So really bypassing is just kind of simply a misunderstanding. So to avoid bypassing, you really want to make sure that all of your language is clear. You ask for feedback, you let people know that they're welcome to ask for clarification if they need it. Second is lack of language skills. So simply not having the language or writing wherewithal to explain your point. Different frames of reference. So you can think of frames of reference as simply perspective. So how your audience might read something or view a situation, view certain terminology, whatever, may be different than how you're initially going to view that. So you're going to have to kind of anticipate that problem and write according to your audience's frame of reference. And lastly, distractions. This one is really simple, relates a lot to digital media. Think of how many emails you receive in one day. It's really easy for something to get overlooked. So you want to be mindful of the fact that you're getting a lot of information on a day-to-day basis, but most likely your audience is too. So how are you going to make a piece of writing that kind of stands out, something that really catches the attention of your audience and lets them know that this message should matter to them? All of these communication barriers definitely can be overcome, usually in pretty simple ways. Um, First is just realizing that communication is imperfect, that sometimes you are going to run into those misunderstandings. So, like I said, again, it helps to invite feedback, asking people if they have any questions, asking people if they understand, checking in with people, and just knowing that sometimes the message isn't going to be perceived perfectly, and having some sort of plan in mind for when and if that happens. Second, question your preconceptions. So, again, kind of stepping back and thinking about the way your audience is going to read a certain piece of writing, how they're going to view a situation, looking at something through their frame of reference. Again, encouraging feedback, inviting interaction with your audience, simply improving your language and listening skills. You're taking that step by being in this class, and adapting the message to the receiver. So, really, again, just looking at things from your audience, from your receiver's perspective, um, and just writing it accordingly. So, this all kind of fits with the characteristics of business writing. So, first, business writing is always going to be purposeful. You'll always be writing to solve problems and convey information. You will have a definite strategy to fulfill each message. So, making that strategy will become easier over time once you have more experience within different genres and types of writing. And it's not like you're going to have to lay out like a 5-point plan about every piece of writing you'll ever have. But again, you want to always be mindful of your message, whether you're drafting it, sending it, or revising it. You want to be mindful of how you're going to respond to any response you might get, things like that. Business writing is always economical. You'll try to present ideas clearly but concisely. Business writing never aims to be very long. You want to always get your point across as quickly as possible. Audience oriented. Obviously, we're talking about audience a lot, so this might seem pretty clear, but you'll concentrate on looking at a problem from the perspective of your audience instead of seeing it from your own. So, to accomplish this kind of writing, the textbook proposes a process they call the 3x3 writing process. The first phase of this writing process is pre-writing. That includes analyzing your audience and purpose, which is what we're really going to be focusing on this week, anticipating the audience and its reaction to the message. So, again, just seeing something from your audience's perspective, and adapting the message to the audience, which is what we're really going to focus on next week as we start kind of composing lengthier messages. Second phase of this is drafting, which is another, pre-writing takes up 25% of this process. Drafting takes up another 25%. Drafting, just collecting information if you need any kind of research, citations, factual information. You're going to organize the information and draft your first version. After that, you'll move on to revising, which the textbook, excuse me, says that this will take up 50% of your time. I agree with this. Revision is a huge process of any type of writing. It includes proofreading, editing for clarity, evaluating whether the message will accomplish your goals. Revision is just huge. I honestly can't stress that enough. And we're going to be focusing on revising a lot within this course. You'll almost always have a chance to revise any major piece of writing, any small writing assignment, because that's really what the real world is like. You'll almost never send out the first draft of anything that you've composed. In fact, you probably don't really want to, because even the pros make typos. I'm getting a PhD in English, and I had to edit this PowerPoint right before I recorded this because I noticed a typo. It just happens. So you always want to make sure that you're revising. And with that, the textbook is careful to emphasize that this 3x3 writing process isn't linear. So that doesn't mean that you just perfectly move through this process. You pre-write, you draft, you revise, you're finished. Everything's great. You can kind of bounce around between these phases. Okay, so that brings us to writing for your audience. So, writing for your audience really has three main steps that are identified in the textbook. So, first is analyzing the purpose of the message. So, what exactly is this message trying to accomplish? Second is anticipating its audience. And third is selecting the best communication channels. So, breaking all of that down, determining your purpose. So this involves asking yourself two questions, pretty simple. Why am I sending this message, and what do I hope to achieve? Your message may have a primary purpose, so the main thing you're trying to accomplish, and a secondary purpose. So you can be trying to persuade someone to do something while also establishing goodwill, so they do decide to help you with something. The most common purposes of business writing are to inform, so convey some sort of information, persuade, convince someone of something, and to establish goodwill. Though establishing goodwill is often a secondary purpose, it's usually involved in some way, shape, or form. Second step to writing for your audience is anticipating and analyzing the audience. So first, you'll really want to look at your primary audience, the main person or people that you're trying to reach. So just involves kind of a list of questions that you would just run through. So who exactly is your primary reader or listener? What are your personal and professional relationships with this person? Do you know them pretty well? Do you know their frame of reference pretty well? Is it something that's kind of unfamiliar to you? What position does this person hold in the organization? Are they some sort of authority figure for you? How much does this person know about the subject? Are you able to use sort of more complicated jargony language? Are they unfamiliar with the subject? What do you know about that person's education, beliefs, culture, and attitudes? So that really plays into that whole idea of their frame of reference. And should you expect a neutral, positive, or negative response to your message? So that might affect kind of how you word things, the language that you use, the whole tone of the message itself. After you've answered those questions about your primary audience, you'll start thinking of the secondary audience. So who else might this message reach? And here's what you want to ask yourself about that person or people. Who might see or hear this message in addition to the primary audience? How do these people differ from the primary audience? Do you need to include more background information? And how must you reshape the message to make it understandable and acceptable to others whom it might be forwarded? So let's go back to one of these questions. Say that your primary audience knows a ton about the subject that you're writing on, but your secondary audience doesn't. What are you going to have to do to this message to make sure that it's accessible to both the primary audience, who knows a lot, and the secondary audience, who doesn't know much, or vice versa? So you really have to be mindful of both of these groups. And the third step of writing for your audience, picking the best channel. So channel would just be the form of communication that you've chosen. So like an email, a memo, a letter, something like that. Your choice of channel depends on lots of different factors. Some of those including the importance of the message, amount of speed and of feedback or interaction needed, necessity of a permanent record, cost of the channel, degree of formality desired, confidentiality and sensitivity of the message, and the receiver's preference and level of technical expertise. So picking your channel can be a little more complex than it initially seems, and you really have to think about the audience's ability, what they're able to access, what they're most likely to see and interact with, and different questions related to that. There are different kinds of channels, obviously, but the textbook likes to categorize them between rich and lean channels. So the richness of a channel involves the extent to which a channel or medium recreates or represents all the information available in the original message. Now, what that really means is that a richer medium allows for more interaction and feedback, while a leaner medium gives a flat, one-dimensional message. So you're going to have more interaction and feedback in something like a face-to-face conversation than you would a text message. It's really as simple as that. They take in the textbook some of the most common channels in business writing, or just kind of communication in general, really, and rank them from the richest to the leanest. So richest is obviously face-to-face, and that would be best for persuasive, bad news, and personal messages. So if you're delivering some really personal news, it would probably be better to do that face-to-face than an IM or something like that. Second would be telephone, best choice when two people can't meet in person. 3 is video chat, everyone's favorite thing right now, best for group interaction, and census building when group members are dispersed. So really best to have a meeting with when you're not able to gather in person. 4th would be email, best for routine messages that don't require immediate feedback. Instant messaging, best for short online messages that need a quick response. A letter for external messages that require formality, sensitivity, or a written record. So going back to that idea of a need for a permanent record, a letter might be a better choice for that than an email. Those kind of quickly get lost in huge inboxes, things like that. 7, a memo to distribute inter-office information, especially when email is unavailable. Blog to share ideas with a wide internet audience and encourage responses. Report to deliver considerable data internally and externally. And 10, a wiki to provide a repository for digital information that can be easily changed. But again, you're not going to get a ton of interaction with that. So it all just depends on how much you want to interact, what your audience is most likely to interact with, going back to these initial questions here. So from here, I want you to move on to the audience analysis discussion board, and that's going to ask you to kind of do some audience analysis yourself of some documents that are already in existence. But again, if you have any questions about anything on here that you'd like answered before you move on to that discussion board, just send me an email or a Canvas message and we can work that out. All right, thanks.